Welcome to the Civil Rights Obligations for English Learner Students Part 2 training video, presented by the Kentucky Department of Education's Office of Continuous Improvement and Support, Division of School and Program Improvement. Participants in this training will leave with an understanding of some of the civil rights obligations for serving English learners, or ELs, including evaluating EL students for special education services and providing special education and English language services, meeting the needs of EL students who opt out of EL programs or particular EL services, as well as monitoring and exiting EL students from EL programs and services. There are 10 civil rights obligations total. The first 5 were covered in Part 1 of our Civil Rights Obligations for English Learner Students video. This video will focus on the last 5 obligations, including evaluating EL students for special education services and providing special education and English language services, meeting the needs of EL students who opt out of EL programs or particular services, monitoring and exiting EL students from EL programs and services, evaluating the effectiveness of the district's EL program, and ensuring meaningful communication with limited English proficient or LEP parents. All districts and schools have an obligation to provide appropriate services under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Equal Educational Opportunities Act, or EEOA, of 1974. These services constitute the district's core EL program. It's important to note that civil rights and EEOA required EL services cannot be paid for with federal funds. The January 2015 Dear Colleague letter issued jointly by the U.S. Department of Education and the U.S. Department of Justice is a great resource regarding these obligations. All students who may have a disability, EL and never EL alike, must be located, identified, and evaluated for special education services in a timely manner. The evaluation cannot be delayed due to EL status. English language proficiency must be considered during the evaluation. Students may not be identified for special education services because of their limited English proficiency. Title VI is violated if an EL is misassigned to special education because of their lack of English skills. EL students with disabilities must be provided with both language assistance and disability-related services. The Individualized Education Program, or IEP, and the Program Service Plan, or PSP, must work together to serve the student. The IEP team must include participants with knowledge about the student's English language acquisition needs. Materials and procedures used to assess ELs must be carefully selected to ensure they measure the extent to which the child has a disability rather than measuring the child's English language skills. Language proficiency progress, meaning access growth, should be discussed, analyzed, and documented as part of the evaluation. If the school suspects a disability, they should proceed with a proper evaluation. A common misconception is that a student has to receive 3 to 5 years of instruction before they can be evaluated. This is completely incorrect as a violation of free appropriate public education, or FAPE. Students do not have to receive 3 to 5 years of instruction before they can be evaluated. The EL teacher should be a part of the Admissions and Release Committee, or ARC team, and the special education teacher should be part of the PSP team. As integral members of IEP teams, parents should be engaged and provided with information necessary to participate as active members of the IEP team in their native language, unless it is clearly not feasible to do so. Language proficiency should be discussed and documented in the IEP. If an EL student has both an IEP and a PSP, the student must continue to receive both services. The IEP does not supersede the PSP or vice versa. If the student is determined to have a significant cognitive disability and is eligible for the alternate state assessment, the PSP team should additionally consider the need for the alternate access test. Questions about English learners with disabilities can be directed to KDE's Office of Special Education and Early Learning, Division of IDEA Implementation and Preschool. Their number is 502-564-4970. Meeting the needs of ELs who opt out. Parents have a right to decline or opt their children out of a district's EL program or out of particular EL services within the program. This decision must be knowing and voluntary. Districts must provide guidance in a language parents can understand to ensure they understand their child's rights, the range of EL services their child could receive, and the benefits of services prior to waiving them. Districts or schools may not recommend that parents opt out for any reason. Parents who have opted their children out of the program or services may decide to enroll the student in the program or services at any time. Children who've been opted out of services retain their status as EL students. The district remains obligated to take the affirmative and appropriate steps required to provide these students access to educational programs. This includes periodically monitoring student progress and notifying parents about lack of adequate progress. Chapter 7 of the English Learner Toolkit contains a checklist for serving ELs who've opted out. How are parents informed of their children's EL status and the right to opt their children out of the EL programs or particular EL services being offered? Are there procedures in place to ensure that parents do not opt their children out of any EL programs or services based on inadequate information or unanswered questions? Is there a process for parents to revisit their opt-out decision and opt their children back into EL programs or particular EL services? If a parent opts their child out of EL services, is there a process to ensure and monitor the following? That the child maintains their EL status, that the district is fulfilling its obligation of meeting the child's language and academic needs, including the annual English language proficiency assessment, and that the child still has appropriate access to the general curriculum. If a parent continues to opt their child out of EL programs and services after being notified of that child's insufficient progress, is the district providing additional training to the student's classroom teacher or teachers in EL instructional strategies? Districts must monitor the progress of all ELs in attaining English language proficiency and acquiring content knowledge. Students cannot exit an EL program until meeting the statewide standardized exit criteria. The academic progress of exited students must be monitored for 4 years after exiting the EL program, as required by ESSA Section 3121A5. This was previously 2 years under No Child Left Behind and applies to students who have exited since the 2017-18 school year. In order to exit from an EL program in Kentucky, a student must achieve a score of 4.5 or higher overall composite proficiency level on a Tier B or Tier C Access for ELLs 2.0 as a student in the first grade or above. Students cannot exit EL status in kindergarten. EL students with severe cognitive disabilities utilizing the alternate access test must test in all domains and score an overall composite of P2 in order to exit the program, except for those students identified as DHH. Monitoring exited students ensures that the students are able to participate meaningfully in the regular classroom, as well as that the students were not prematurely exited, that any academic deficits they experienced as a result of participation in the EL program have been alleviated, and that the students are successfully participating in the regular academic program comparable to their never EL peers. This monitoring process is conducted by designated instructional staff. Information gathered during monitoring must be maintained in the students' records. As you monitor exited ELs, you'll need to collect and review information to determine whether they are successful. This list shows some data sources you could use in your analysis. Records on the length of time from entry into a U.S. English-speaking school to exit from the EL program, Performance on standardized achievement tests, grades and content area classes, grade point averages, teacher observations, parent observations and feedback, meeting promotion or graduation requirements, as well as graduation rates. EL programs should be periodically monitored to determine if students are being enabled to do the following in a reasonable length of time: attain English language proficiency, and meaningfully participate in the standard educational program comparable to their never EL peers. If the district's chosen EL program proves to be ineffective, the district must revise the program. Ensuring meaningful communication with LEP parents. Districts have an obligation to ensure meaningful communication with limited English proficient or LEP parents in a language they can understand, and to adequately notify LEP parents of information about any program, service, or activity of a school district that is called to the attention of non-LEP parents. Title VI is violated if parents whose English is limited do not receive school notices and other information in a language they can understand. Remember, just as fully English proficient parents may have a child who is an English learner, a non-EL student may have parents who are limited English proficient. Examples of essential information which must be available to LEP parents include registration and enrollment documents, report cards, student policies, procedures and handbooks, conferences, and permission slips. Districts must have a process in place for identifying LEP parents. Language assistance must be provided effectively with appropriate, competent staff or appropriate and competent outside resources. Schools and districts may not charge parents for the translation and interpreter services provided. Interpretation refers to the immediate communication of meaning from one language into another. An interpreter conveys meaning orally. Translation refers to converting written text from one language into another language. Remember that a mix of written translation and oral interpretation may be appropriate and, in fact, the most effective means for communicating with parents. Interpreters must have knowledge in both languages of any specialized terms or concepts to be used in the communication at issue. They must also be trained in the role of an interpreter, including the ethics of interpreting and the need to maintain confidentiality. A qualified interpreter may have credentials as a certified interpreter through an outside agency, or they may have completed an internal training process at the district. The district may choose to require certain certification or training credentials for interpreters and document translators at their discretion. However, the district is responsible for ensuring that individuals providing interpretation and translation services are qualified to do so. Being bilingual is not the same thing as being an interpreter. A bilingual staff member may be able to communicate directly in a different language, but may not be competent to interpret in and out of that language or to translate documents. Schools may not rely on or ask students, siblings, friends, or untrained staff to interpret for parents or translate documents. There are many reasons why using students, siblings, and friends as interpreters is inappropriate. Just to name a few, discussing confidential information with individuals not trained in the ethics of interpreting could be a potential FERPA violation. Additionally, having children translate for their parents changes the dynamic of the situation regarding the parents' authority because the parents are dependent on the children to relay the information. Machine translation. Google Translate is an example of machine translation. There are often issues with accuracy, word choice, syntax, and linguistic fidelity. It's difficult or impossible to handle issues such as misspellings, slang, misuse or missing punctuation, double entendres, cultural references, variable word order, and changes in voice. There could also be potential issues with confidentiality. Footnote 103 on page 38 of the Dear Colleague letter states, some school districts have used web-based automatic translation to translate documents. Utilization of such services is appropriate only if the translated document accurately conveys the meaning of the source document, including accurately translating technical vocabulary. The department's caution against the use of web-based automated translations that are inaccurate, are inconsistent with the school district's obligation to communicate effectively with LEP parents. Thus, to ensure that essential information has been accurately translated and conveys the meaning of the source document, the school district would need to have a machine translation reviewed and edited as needed by an individual qualified to do so. Additionally, the confidentiality of documents may be lost when documents are uploaded without sufficient controls into a web-based translation service and stored in their database. School districts using any web-based automated translation services for documents containing personally identifiable information from a student's education record must ensure that disclosure to the web-based service complies with the requirements of the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, or FERPA, and its implementing regulations. Paying for translation and interpretation. The majority of a district's translation and interpretation expenses must be paid for by the district, as communicating with LEP parents is a civil rights obligation. Federal programs such as Title I Part A and Title III can be used to pay for services and activities tied directly to those programs. Some examples: general funds, meaning state or local funds, must be used for the following documents. And this is not an all-inclusive list, just a few examples. Translations of documents provided to all parents, such as field trip forms, report cards, transportation information, discipline handbooks, etc. Oral communications with the general parent population, parent-teacher conferences, non-title program-related school meetings, academic counseling, robocalls, etc. And documents or meetings which are the responsibility of the district, including IEP meetings, OCR notifications, etc. Title I Part A funds. These are limited to Title I Part A sponsored or required activities at Title I schools. This might be a Title I family engagement activity, a Title I newsletter, etc. And Title III Part A funds could be used for translation and interpreting for a purpose above and beyond the level of other federal, state, and local requirements. This may be allowable provided that all supporting conditions are met. An example of this would be a Title III parent engagement activity. Language may not be the only obstacle a district encounters when communicating with LEP parents. Cultural differences and expectations play a large role in this process as well. This might include past experience with schooling, understanding the purpose for being contacted, cultural differences, and differences in expectations of student, teacher, and parent roles in education. An informational meeting for LEP parents to explain the ins and outs of the American school system may be a great way for your district to address these issues. Questions related to English learners or the Title III program can be directed to KDE's Office of Continuous Improvement and Support, Division of School and Program Improvement, English Learners, Migrant and Neglected Students Branch. The phone number is 502-564-3791, and program consultant email addresses can be found on the English Learners Contact Guide. As always, many resources were consulted when creating this training video. The resources have been divided into a few categories. Some of these actually refer to the Civil Rights Obligations Part 1 video. We have basic information, legal obligations and guidance, communicating with LEP parents, immigrant students, and assessment. Thank you.